defensive approach.
Follow the money, then take the money. What do the cartels want more than anything? They want power and money. It is unrestricted warfare. I'm a mama bear. I've got 6 kids. I've got beautiful grandchildren. And every time I talk about this, I just tear up.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellett. Sarah Carter, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Oh, it's so great to be with you, Jan. Thank you so much for having me and being here at my office in Washington, D.C.
Well, recently there was this massive, kind of very high-end tunnel discovered across the border, under the border. And I know tunnels is something that you've been involved in the past. So tell me a little bit about how important these tunnels are and how you get a tunnel like this even built.
Well, these are highly sophisticated tunnels. So I started my work, more than 20 years ago. I would say probably more like 25 years ago when I started covering the southern border, with
we
Mexico.
had them in the
It's about
70s,
2,000 miles.
60s.
Varying terrain. So you go from the Tijuana estuary, which I'm very familiar with, and this is the area which the tunnel was discovered. This most recent tunnel, 55 feet deep, miles long, ending up in another, in San Diego, covered by a warehouse, a business. This is very common for the Sinaloa cartel. Adriano Felix used to operate out of the Tijuana area, so that plaza is very familiar with our law enforcement. One of the most interesting things about how those tunnels are built is that not only are they highly sophisticated, they take a lot of equipment, right? So you got to be able to dig, you got to be able to move the dirt out, you got to be able to get oxygen in. They've got usually rail systems where they move the narcotics or the humans that they're trafficking through. So they've got to get them from point A to point B. They've got to get it there safely. They've got to be able to then move their product, their illicit narcotics, outside of that warehouse and then out into the distribution, right, sites throughout the United States. Or if it's humans, they got to get them through there alive, safely, get them into the warehouse, and then move them out. We have eyes everywhere. Under President Donald J. Trump and under his administration, our administration right now, we are working with every law enforcement agency as a whole of government. We understand these choke points, but it's still difficult. When you have something that's under 55 feet of ground, they've been building it for years, right? We don't know how long they've been moving narcotics through there. Hundreds of millions of dollars of narcotics have probably made their way through this tunnel. Imagine the national security implications of that. Imagine us trying to discover these tunnels. These are tunnel rats, right? They figured out how to make them bigger, better, broader, more effective, and we have to be able to keep up with it. We have technology that we are using to try to keep up with some of these bad actors, right? Sinaloa is famous for it. And we also have our law enforcement, our U.S. Customs and Border Protection. We have tunnel teams. So we are constantly playing this game of cat and mouse. But now, under President Trump, we're on the offensive, right? We're not just reactionary. We're on the offensive. So we're actively seeking out these tunnels. We can't go into details of how we do this and what qualifies us to be able to do this, because we don't want to give away the information to our enemies and to the cartels. But we are actively seeking out these tunnels. We are going to take them out. We're going to destroy them. They're having a much harder time getting their product across the border because we've shut it down. And they are looking for new ways and new mechanisms. But this is an old one. I actually ran into some of these tunnels when I was a young journalist covering the border. My first investigations, I actually stumbled on some of the tunnels. Nothing as fancy as this. A much more rudimentary tunnel, but I did find them.
So this actually reminds me of something you wrote in your letter in the National Drug Control Strategy, which is new, actually. This is something I'd love to talk about, but first you said, we will take the fight to the enemy with a relentless offensive. That's what I'm hearing. But then there's the other part, which is the building the culture of resilience, right? Where living drug-free is the norm.
And living drug-free is the social norm. The majority of Americans do not use drugs. It is tragic and horrible that we have addiction rates that soared in the United States. A lot of that happened when we didn't pay attention to the opioid crisis in America. We went from 8,000 in the early 1980s drug overdose deaths a year, right? Which people were concerned about, to at its high point in, in 2019, and then in 2020 and 2022, and we saw, 112,000 Americans in 1 year. In 1 year. Unacceptable. And we see our children, dying. Children that should not be dying. They didn't die of an overdose. They died because they ordered an Adderall. Sadly, because our society is, hyper-focused on prescription medication, or people think that because they're going to take an Adderall, they're going to do better on tests, and there's this competition. But ordering Adderall online, on the internet, on whatever social media app they're using, and what they get is a pure fentanyl tablet. And when their parent finds them, they find them dead on the floor of their bedroom.
I was looking at this wall of people that you have here at the office, and it's, utterly heartbreaking. It actually hits home, because if you haven't been, I haven't been sort of directly faced with this issue. I have a few friends whose children have actually passed, so it's close to me. But when you see all the faces, you realize this could be anybody. This isn't like a specific demographic. This is literally anybody.
Could be your child.
Mm-hmm.
Could be a 2-year-old. Could be a 3-year-old that got their hand, which has happened, on a pill, or a family member who's an addict who leaves things lying around, or, like I said, a 13-year-old who I know is, horrific stories I've heard where they've ordered it online and then their parents walk in the bedroom and find them dead, or friends, and we've had friends. And I actually was with my daughter. We were going back to her old high school, and we're driving around the neighborhood, and she said, "Hey Mom, remember so-and-so? Did you know she died of fentanyl poisoning? Hey Mom, remember this kid? Did you know that they are in a hospital now and they've completely lost their minds? Remember, he was on the football team and he, is using drugs, and now, his parents can't even salvage him because he has induced psychosis from the narcotics." This is unacceptable. This is the United States of America. If anything, we should be there for our community. We should be able to stop this. And we are under President Trump. But what we had, under President Biden, and by the way, so many Americans who didn't want to face the crisis, we were ignoring a real threat to our nation. A real threat. Could you imagine, and someone told me this, just today, a friend of mine was saying, could you imagine if a bomb was dropped every year in the United States and 100,000 people were just wiped off the planet, just every year, or 68,000, or 79,000? We would be in a state of shock. We wouldn't even know how to deal with that, right? It would be on the news every day, it would be the headlines, but for some reason, this did not become the headlines until young Americans and Americans from all economic backgrounds just started dying. And parents started talking to one another, and they said, "You had a 12-year-old that died? Wait, your son was only 3? Wait, my mother took a Percocet and she died?" We started to wake up, and we are starting to wake up. We've awoken this sleeping giant, right? And I always say to people, I'm a mama bear, right? I've got 6 kids. I've got beautiful grandchildren. And every time I talk about this, I just tear up. This could be my child. I'm going to have, dinner today. Today is the day we're doing this interview, and tonight I'm meeting with a family, that Angel family, that I haven't met them before, but I knew their son. He was one of my son-in-law's best friends. They went to high school together. They played football together. He went to college, graduated from law school. His parents had all the hopes in the world for him. So proud of him. So proud of him. And he went to a party after law school in Miami, made one big, huge mistake. Did a line of cocaine that had fentanyl in it, and he seized, had a heart attack, and died in an instant in the party. This is unforgiving. You can't experiment anymore. We have adversaries that have contaminated our supply chain. We have cartels that could care less. I hate hearing that statement, but why do they want their customer to die? They do not care, because there's always another customer around the corner. The majority of Americans do not use drugs. We become reliant a lot. We're, kind of a dependent society on our medical industry, right? But as far as illicit drugs, the majority don't. And hopefully with this presidency, we're making a shift, but we can't let the foot off the gas. We have to continue. 68,000 this year is a big decrease for us, right? From, the 112,000 plus that we lost. But it's still 68,000 lives.
Sarah, we're going to take a quick break, and folks, we're going to be right back. Carter. So something I've covered quite a bit on this show is the Chinese Communist Party's use of unrestricted warfare, and one of the methods of warfare is drug warfare, right? And actually someone we both know pretty well, Peter Schweitzer, has documented how the Chinese are involved in every part of the supply chain of what the cartels end up delivering to America. How much are you looking at this?
Every day.
Mm-hmm.
There is not a day that goes by that I'm not in this office that I do not think about that I do not address that. I've already spoken with Chinese counterparts about this. I've made it very clear that we understand and we know where these precursor chemicals are coming from, and that it will not be tolerated, and that we will continue to hold anybody and everyone, and even nation states, accountable for the deaths of our children. President Trump has made that very clear. And I promise that I will continue, and I have made that promise both in our national drug control strategy and openly, without hesitation, that I will never be afraid to speak up and hold those actors accountable that are killing our kids. It is absolutely unacceptable. You're right, it is unrestricted warfare. It is unrestricted warfare. There are ways of targeting a nation without ever lifting up what we can consider an obvious weapon. So I know that, and I've made it very clear in our national drug control strategy that our focus is going to be a clean supply chain from origination to destination. That means when products leave mainland China and come to the United States, I expect that those products and those cargo is to be clean. Is to be clean. I have made that very publicly known. I've made that privately known, and we are working on that. It's kind of a carrot and a stick, right? You want to do business with me? Make sure those precursor chemicals that are used to make fentanyl are not in that supply chain. And if they're dual use, then tell me how much is in there. File that licensing agreement so that we can measure it when it comes to our country, so that I can ensure that any precursor chemical, whether that's being used for makeup or for some other usage, that there isn't an excessive amount in there that should not be coming to the United States. And we're hitting every single choke point. That is as well with the U.S. mail. USPIS has been working very closely with me, United States Postal Service and Inspection, and we are hitting the cartels. And by the way, any adversarial nation that's allowing this to happen at every single point, whether that's land, sea, or air.
So there has been a significant reduction in the number of deaths. And so what exactly do you ascribe that to?
A number of factors, but the most important one is President Trump's policy, our policy on the border. We shut down the border, which first and foremost, I believed was the most simple task. Follow the law. Shut down the border. It was wide open. You know, I would cover the stories there so much, spend so much of my life on that border, and I would just see hundreds and thousands of people just pouring into our country across the Rio Grande. Even late at night, I would watch with, night vision, and I would see hundreds of people moving across the Mexico side, getting ready to transfer on boats and come over, whether that was Eagle Pass, or I was in Brownsville, or, it didn't matter, McAllen, Texas. I would see the hordes of people and children. My God, children being trafficked into the United States without parents, without any guardians, in the hands of smugglers that did only God knows what to these beautiful children that had nowhere to turn to, right? And then the American people and what we faced from that. So I would see that. So we shut down that border. We started hitting all of the major choke points. We have a Department of War that's actually doing its job. We designated the cartels foreign terrorist organizations, the biggest ones, the most nefarious organizations. We captured him, one of the best operations I've ever seen conducted. We have done what we said we were going to do. It was no more games. It isn't like, we're going to do this, shame on you, and we never do anything.
And just on that point, did you see less material coming from Venezuela after that operation?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I mean, we're still fighting it, right? We still got, cocaine cultivation. This is money. You're talking hundreds of billions of dollars, right, in resourcing. So you have to imagine decades, more than 50 years of these cartels amassing hundreds of billions of dollars. And we're the United States government. So we have to abide by rules, law. Thankfully, we have a president that doesn't tie the hands of law enforcement or the military, allows them to do their work, allows us to do our work. But we still have to abide by it. We still have to go through a bureaucracy. We still have laws that we have to respect. The cartels don't have to do that. They don't need to respect anybody. They do whatever they want. Imagine hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions, in illicit financing, oil theft, right? Even the sale of exotic animals, money laundering, moving their money through cryptocurrencies, all kinds of new innovative ways of hiding and moving their financing. That's what we're up against. So we're up against not just a gang. This isn't a small gang of bad guys that are bootlegging across the border like the 1800s or during Prohibition, right? This is about massive organizations that have embedded themselves into the fiber and fabric of their governments. They have threatened, they have blackmailed, they have purchased homes in the United States, they have more money than we can ever imagine, and we have to target them. Not only physically target their organizations, that means destroy and dismantle them with our Homeland Security task forces and all of our other agencies, but we have to literally rip their financing from them. We can't collapse these organizations unless we take away their money. And I promise you, we are taking their money. I don't want a cartel leader to get up in the morning and be able to pay out all the 100,000 people that they have on their, I call it like their army, right? Their boots on the ground. I want them to get up in the morning and try to go into their account and not be able to get in it, to have it seized completely. So we're working on multiple levels, and we've seen cooperation on all levels, even with governments in the Western Hemisphere.
Well, this is what you're describing is the expertise of the FBI director, is follow the money, as he likes to say.
Yes, Director Patel, he's right. Follow the money. Follow the money, then take the money. What do the cartels want more than anything? They want power and money. That is what keeps them alive. That's their heartbeat, is their power and their money. And they're vicious. They have no regard for human life. They have no regard for the nation states that they operate in. And we have to be just as tough on them, if not tougher. And that means taking and seizing their financing. And by the way, doing what we're doing right now in Mexico, targeting those even in the government that have sold out to the cartels, that have made it easier for them to operate, you know, getting those extradition, those warrants on them, and working closely with our counterparts like we do with President Sheinbaum, for example. We saw significant progress in Mexico, especially with El Mencho, with CJ&G, when we were able to go after El Mencho. And we did that through our intelligence, but utilizing the Mexican National Guard, the Mexican Special Forces, you know, General Trevilla, his operation. They cooperated with us. We said, look, here's the information, go get them. And they did. And we'd never seen that before, not like that, not in that same way, not with that cooperation. And by the way, right now, you know, targeting the folks in Sinaloa, all of the government officials that are part of the Culiacan clan, you know, that have protected the Sinaloa cartel, and Los Chapitos, and Los Maitos, and, you know, Joaquin Guzman's, you know, entire operation, El Chapo's entire operation. We are able to do that, one, because the Mexican government, like many of the governments in our hemisphere, know that President Trump means what he says. He just absolutely does. If he said, we are going after you, if you do not cooperate with us, we are going to target you, and you are going to regret it. So do you want to cooperate? Yes or no? And I think also, beyond that, it's what's good for them. And they know it too. They're their own sovereign nations. And they understand, and I think they've understood for some time, that being government officials that really want to clean out the system, right? That really want to get to some point where their own countrymen aren't reliant on the movement of drug financing, but reliant on their own economic futures of prosperity for their people. And they're seeing that now, and they're seeing that opportunity, and they trust that President Trump and this administration will not abandon them, that we will see it through. And you can't say that about other administrations.
Well, Sarah Carter, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
No, thank you so much for having me. I look forward to coming back and, you know, spending more time with you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you all for joining Drug Czar Sarah Carter and me on this episode of American Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Yanya Kellogg.
Are you sitting at home living in pain? Maybe it's in your hands, maybe your back or your hips. The good news is you don't need to live in pain. Why? Because there is Omega XL, a one-of-a-kind, natural, powerful joint relief supplement created from the green lip mussels of New Zealand. Drug-free, non-habit forming, it's small, easy to swallow, and it's backed by more than 40 years of clinical research. If you're experiencing daily aches and pains due to aging and overuse, try Omega XL. Just ask anybody who uses it. The results are undeniable.
I had and that slowed me down.
I had considerable pain in my back.
Really felt the pain. I mean, in my ankles and in my heels.
I'm telling you about something that's gonna change your life. It has revived me.
This works.
I'm not a prisoner anymore to my pain.
As I was getting older, my joints started to feel that way.